Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're really excited to be here tonight with you all. People are going to continue to keep joining, but I am going to start by telling you a little bit about the series and the event we have tonight. So I'm Sarah Chapman, and I'm the executive director of the nonprofit Media Burn Archive, which is based in Chicago. Media Burn collects, produces, and distributes documentary video created by artists, activists, and community groups. Our mission is to use archival media to deepen context and encourage critical thought through a social justice lens. And this event is, I think, maybe number 15 or so in an ongoing free series called Virtual Talks with Video Activists, where we create conversations surrounding the way that media production can spark social change. And we are so pleased to be presenting this in partnership with the Department of Cinema and Media Studies at the University of Chicago. And we'd like to thank Professor Dan Morgan for his assistance in coordinating the event. So tonight we are very excited to be presenting you with the rare opportunity to get to see sneak preview of a clips from a film that is not yet released, the documentary Walk with Frank. And we are joined by the film's co-directors, Ryan and Matt Mayers, as well as the film subject, Frank Romeo. And the event will be moderated by Yana Khashper. So I'll just tell you a little bit about all of these people, and then I will hand it off to them. But Yana graduated magna cum laude from New York University and went out to work with the New York City Fire Department Counseling Unit, where her focus was to provide services to firefighters and emergency personnel of the FDNY impacted by the World Trade Center tragedy and other disasters. Yana's addiction took hold of her life during this time, leading to complete incapacitation. After recovering thanks to an emphasis on physical activity, she co-founded Recovery Fitness with the goal of providing sober experiences and connections to other individuals pursuing recovery from drug and alcohol addiction. So she's the perfect person to moderate this conversation tonight. Our two filmmakers are Ryan and Matt Mayers, who are brothers. They have been making movies together since they were boys, and they bring that same passion to their films today. Ryan is an Emmy Award-winning editor known for various film and television projects, including the hour-long documentary series Oprah's Next Chapter and A&E Biography. Matt has produced films for national brands and musicians, and his original series of family-friendly shorts have received national attention. Their goal is to make films that find an emotional truth while telling an entertaining story. And then finally, Frank Romeo is a decorated Vietnam veteran, artist, and educator who has made a life study of the effects of PTSD on veterans of every generation. He knows what the experts say, that 20% of the male homeless population are veterans, and that there is a strong correlation between PTSD and homelessness. After decades of work in high schools, where he has educated young people about the realities of war, Romeo is hitting the streets. On March 1st, 2019, the day he celebrated his 70th birthday, he began a 750-mile, 3-month walk across New York State. Developed with the assistance of Mr. Thomas Ronayne, may have butchered that, director of the Office of the Suffolk County Executive Veterans Service Agency, Frank's itinerary included 25 homeless shelters that span the state. He engaged the homeless veterans he met in a conversation about his own 50-year fight with PTSD. Walk with Frank documents his journey. And so I'm so pleased to hand it off to this great set of people. I'll just say before we start that if everyone could please stay muted during the beginning while we're watching the clips and while people are doing introductions, just so that we can all hear. And then afterwards, you can feel free to ask questions in the chat and ask questions out loud yourself as you see fit. We'd love for this to be a great conversation. So with that, Yana, please, or no, Ryan and Matt, please tell us about this film that you made.
Yeah, happy to. Hi, thanks everyone for coming. We really appreciate this. And we couldn't be prouder to be involved in this project and to have gotten to know Frank and everyone that has been involved in making this thing happen. This film really started, I mean, everything has been really serendipitous about it, from just everything about the way we met Frank to the way the filming came together to the way the post-production came together. And, you know, it's really, we feel it's a really important message. And just to give a little bit of backstory, and we'll let Frank go a little further into this. Frank's been suffering, you know, from PTSD ever since he came back from Vietnam in the late 60s. And Frank, you know, in a unique way, documented his discovery of the mental illness he was dealing with. And after 30 years, learning to come to terms with it, he discovered artwork as a way to sort of to sort of deal with his issues. And what he found even more importantly was he found it a way to help other people deal with their issues. So Frank spent years traveling around the country with the artwork and talking to veterans and sort of using his experience and his message to get people to open up. And all the while documenting what he was doing, whether it was photos, whether it was a blog, which eventually took Frank back to Vietnam, where he spent a few months in Southeast Asia, traveling the path that he traveled when he was there fighting in Vietnam, and basically seeing how the enemy dealt with post-trauma from their perspective. And seeing a whole country and a whole region move on from post-trauma, Frank realized that, not only was he stuck in place and this was helping him to move forward, but this was a message that he felt he could show to help other people move forward. So what he did was start, I guess, 4 or 5 years ago, started planning this walk, and this walk across New York State to sort of promote the curriculum that he's been building, that he piloted with Bayshore High School, but also to, again, document his journey traveling on the ground, meeting veterans, living amongst the homeless, seeing the issues that veterans face today. So, when we met Frank, we were sort of looking for a project to take on that was like this. We've been making films forever, but lately we've been trying to find stuff that has, some sort of social impact and can help people. And Frank sort of just kind of fell into our apartment one day with this project and this idea. And we kind of just, we went with it. And, aside from it being a life-changing experience for us, we became best friends with Frank and made a lot of best friends along the way. And the whole message and project has really changed our perspective on not just mental illness, but our veterans and just humanity in general. And we really feel like this is a really important film to help people to understand mental illness, to understand not just what they might be going through, but what someone in their family or friends might be going through. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ryan if there's anything you want to add.
Yeah, quickly, I'd love to tell just from my perspective, when I first met Frank, he was raising money for the walk itself. And I was there with our DP, director of photography, Richard Chisholm, who was the one that introduced me to Frank. And Frank's spirit just, it was something so just resonant and amazing that I was so attracted to him and his story. And then when the walk itself happened, we were fortunate enough to have the opportunity to document it. And Matt and I aren't veterans, so we didn't really know what the story of a veteran was or what a veteran goes through. And to be able to go on this journey with Frank, we were almost able to see it through his eyes and be able to meet these veterans along the way and see how they responded to him. And every veteran responded the same way that Matt and I did to Frank, where they were so taken by him and they were able to open up to him because of what Frank brought and how open and honest Frank was. And with it, hopefully, we can spread the message of that mental illness is not something that needs to be stigmatized. The PTSD is not something that you should be embarrassed about or afraid to talk about. And that's something I think a lot of veterans deal with. That's something that we've seen. So,
yeah, one of the first things that struck us was how open and honest Frank talked about his issues. And, it's one of the things that draws you into him, and his ability to tell a story and just and willingness to talk about himself. And I think that willingness really is contagious. And I think it really gave us an opportunity as filmmakers to kind of really get some of these people to open up where they normally wouldn't have with a camera crew or, some random other veteran coming into their home or in their shelter or wherever, just to ask questions and talk. But it wasn't like that. We weren't approaching it from the point of view of trying to find treatment or trying to find cures for these guys. It was really just about listening. So that was a way that we sort of approached the storytelling as well.
So we should let Frank talk, not take up all the airwaves.
Hey, thank you for having us and doing this. It's been quite a journey. It started 5 years ago, and I had been advocating and teaching mental health and PTSD. Basically, I had a limited audience, and And I needed people, I needed to get the message out there. And I'm 72 years old now, and you know, times are kind of running out, and I needed people to pay attention. And so I thought, you know, perhaps they would pay attention with the walk, and it worked. And people started paying attention. It started out to be PTSD and veterans, and morphed. By the end of the walk, it was a mental health movement, and it took on a life of its own. And I'm lucky enough to have met Matt and Ryan. We just seemed to gel right from the beginning, and we became best friends, like they said, and we know each other's families well. And so it became almost, and you'll see from the clips, it became a family project. My family, their families, you know, and it just took on a life of its own. So it was quite moving, the whole project from beginning to end. And things seemed to fall in place. It was almost destined, and you know, kismet, that every time we went to do something, there it was, and things just happened for us. And again, it took on a life of its own. But you know, let's begin. Let's go to the film clips and get the ball rolling. Taking that first step and saying, I have mental illness. I've now crossed the line. There's no turning back here. Because when you say it out loud, you hear it for yourself. When you say it to yourself and not out loud, it's still in your head. You know, it's a struggle. The demons are all at it. And sometimes you're the observer. And you're watching the battle rage, good and bad, right and wrong, suicide, non-suicide. Should I talk about it? Should I just keep quiet? Should I take meds and just pass out and go to sleep so I don't have to visually watch that bad commercial repeat itself? I mean, I think we need to understand how we got here. It's almost like, how do you know where you're going if you don't know where you've been?
The idea is to get my life squared away. I'm in school right now for nursing. I also do the resident advisor position here, which is really kind of cool, helping out where the rules need to be enforced, but also helping out the guys as far as, you know, taking care of them, taking care of their needs, that type of thing.
So you had a muscle one day and mom the next day?
I'm actually, yeah, I'm more the muscle, I guess. If they get hurt or if they need anything, it's like, hey, where's Doc?
We had a guy the other day, he had an interview for a job, and Doc took all of his clothes, ironed them out for him. If he had a button missing, he sewed his button on for him, and he got him ready to go out the door, you know? And right here, he's got a sewing machine. He just bought it. It's awesome because this spot right here, we turned it into, it was empty space, and we turned it into, you know, a sewing machine, an ironing, I mean, basically fabric repair, fix and go. It's really awesome.
With this place is a consequence over our heads. If you drink or drug and you're caught, right, then you find the road.
Yeah.
And I like that consequence.
I like it too.
Yeah. It makes me think. Because right now, honestly, right now everything is going great.
Yeah.
The main reason that everything went to crap is the deployment to Iraq and some of the things I did there as a medic. And so I came back and started having bad nightmares and that type of thing. And I was too stupid to go to the VA and get it checked out because I was like, oh, it's just part of the deal, you know. Never even thought about PTSD. I just thought, I saw a lot of bad stuff. And I was actually still, as a paramedic on the street, still seeing the same stuff. So I started drinking to sleep, self-medicating. And I did that from 2006 through all the way up to 2013. Now, it wasn't as bad until like the end of it, but I went through 2 marriages. I just got my kids back in my life. It's been rough.
Thank you all for coming. It's a very special day. I get a little choked up. This is Family Day. PTSD and mental illness is contagious. If someone in the family suffers, the entire family suffers. So my family is here. They're embracing me, and we have to make it a common conversation. We can no longer sweep it under the rug if we're going to help our young veterans. And I would like for you all to join me in walking into the city of Poughkeepsie on my journey. is for Grandpa. You're walking with Grandpa. Eastbound lane is to your right. Right of the cones, eastbound lane.
I can recall times where he has gotten very angry. My father got so angry that he took this very large, we're a big Italian family, we got pasta and, at every meal. And I can remember a time where he took this big bowl of bouillabaisse, so it was red and there were meatballs and there was fish, and he slammed it, and then all the pasta and sauce and bouillabaisse went all over us, and then he locked us outside. And so we're in white shirts and pasta sauce and meatballs and, spaghetti hanging out of our heads, and we often thought that this is who we are, this is what we look like.
Oh, jeez, I'm sorry.
What did I do?
Almost poked my eye out.
We'll keep it up high.
Yeah. I'm short. I need to go somewhere where someone will see me. What was like that?
We look back on it now and we laugh about it, and that's the way our family is about, things that he was going through.
Come on. Come. Snuggle in with me. Keep me warm.
He was open about his feelings towards us and affectionate, and there was always a hug and a kiss. But he could have a temper, an explosive temper. My sister and I would have this sort of little inside joke like, did Dad get all Vietnam on you? And for us, that meant, did he get to that explosive point? I remember for Christmas, you always get Dad like Old Spice or ties or, these things. And one year he asked for an easel and some paint and stuff, and we're all just like, you don't even help us with homework. Like, what do you mean you need this? And he's like, I don't know, I just got to feel the urge to paint something. And I remember coming home and he had painted something that I just didn't think he had the ability. And when I asked him about it, he's like, I don't even know where it came from. It was just something that I saw. And as he's telling me this, I'm thinking to myself, like, what's in there? What's inside there? What are things that I don't know?
I never forget my first painting. I was crying, and I sat there and I was reliving the day I got shot, and I had tears in my eyes. I was shaking all over, and I began going through all the stories, and with each story came a painting. The dam had burst. Some of my friends committed suicide when the dam burst, and I found art.
Once he showed us these paintings, once he showed us this glimpse, what he did was open himself up for us to ask him questions, right? So we got to hear his story. And I think that that's how he's started to heal himself on this journey, and then how he's helped to heal the family.
I hadn't talked about anything, and it was you that inspired me to say something. So, thank you.
I'm a survivor of gun violence. My sister, Anne Marie, was murdered at the Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut. She was a first grade teacher, and she died with a pile of 6-year-old babies underneath her. And I got PTSD.
My worst PTSD issues, still to this day, have to do with hearing a jet aircraft. A loud whine of a jet aircraft. Where I can't, when I don't know where it is, where I can't see it. I'll stand in my backyard and I will look up and I will follow a plane across the sky just to know that he's
still
safely away from me.
After my wife passed away, be 30 years ago, that was my trigger. She wasn't here to keep me grounded.
Right.
It was just a little child. That's when it all came out.
I talk to other vets and say, I know where you're coming from. Even though I didn't serve very long, but I lived with a guy that went to Vietnam for 3 years. I had to see him, how he was, the violent outrages and stuff like that. This little thing set him off. One day we were walking down the street and backfire. He he's, looking around, jumping, sometimes, as a kid, that's hard to, you don't know what to say to dad, because you don't know, if you say something to dad, you don't know if it's going to set him off or what.
So I'll step in. Hi, everyone. My name is Yana. And I'm so incredibly grateful to be able to be part of this incredible conversation. Frank, Matt, Brian, Sarah. It's definitely an honor to join this discussion, to join the conversation and be part of the talk. Frank, your experience, your movie, your courage is so incredibly admirable and inspiring. And it definitely brought me to tears. And I've seen it before, but those clips are just so powerful. One of the things that really stood out to me, and I wanted to kind of ask your experience about, was that opening the dam that you talked about, admitting for the first time that you have a problem, that something's not right. Because for so long, and I know my experience with addiction is similar. For so long, I just thought this is how I'm always going to be. And I was losing hope and I didn't know what was going on. And being able to utter those words for the first time, having a problem, it was both scary, but also freeing to be able to talk about it. So I wanted to pick your brain a little and ask about your experience with that.
It's incredible. It's the hardest thing in your life you'll do. And we came across this on the walk with so many people. We worked with the state troopers, of course, because we were walking and, they kind of directed us. Private conversations with troopers that most of them are veterans that are suffering with PTSD, but they won't step forward because of the stigma and the overall stigma that affects all of us in society. I mean, we sweep it under the rug, and that impacts us. That keeps us from opening up. That keeps us from taking that first step. Another clip that we had was in Oneonta, when Oneonta had a parade for me when I walked through Oneonta, and there was a young veteran that a family asked me to speak with him, and he walked at the end of the parade. And then when the parade was over and I made a little speech and I looked for him, he took off. He wasn't ready to take the first step. And so taking the first step, I think unless we can open the conversation about mental illness in this country, that it's going to be incredibly hard for people to take that first step. We have to start treating mental illness as we do physical illness. It's nothing to be ashamed of. You've been through it. I've been through it. And every family now with the pandemic, every family is touched in some way with a traumatic event. And that's part of what I teach with the education, is talking to students and preparing them and saying, look, this is not something in a movie. This is all of us. We're, a soldier or a veteran, he's just the man next door. He's just the guy down, so he's your uncle, your aunt. And so we need to open up the conversation.
Absolutely. And I think it's important, as in one of the clips that was talked about, post-traumatic stress doesn't have to be a specific experience with near death, right? Post-traumatic stress has many qualifiers, for lack of a better word, and it could be perceived danger. It could be secondary stress from a family member, a loved one experiencing a trauma, right? And trauma is different for all of us. So I love the awareness spreading, the shattering some of the stigma, and really starting and continuing these very important conversations that need to be had in order to normalize the condition, and it's not, I say condition loosely because it's not a disability. I think our experiences are our greatest asset. And with those experiences, we could change the world. I'm very optimistic in that sense.
We can attack mental illness by just saying the words, I have mental illness. And each time I spoke at dozens and dozens of places on the walk, and I do, it's what I've been doing for 30 years, and I introduce myself as having a mental illness. And just by saying the words, that is the first step in getting it, breaking that stigma. And I think we all can attack it just by talking out loud, not keeping it in our heads. You've been through it. I mean, for years it was in my head. And until I said the words out loud and heard it for myself, it really didn't hit me, wow, it's freeing. It's, I can now move to the second step. And so, that's what the movie really tried to do, is to attack that stigma. If by anything else, by no other means than just by saying the words out loud, I have mental illness.
Absolutely. And opening that conversation to other people that may be struggling. I know you and I have talked in the past about the peer movement, and talking about in the military, veterans, service members, soldiers, they understand each other like no other person can, no other civilian can. And having this common bond, this shared problem, and being able to find a shared solution. We've walked the walk. Doc talked about it, you've talked about it so much, to be able to say, I know where you've been, I've been there too, and there's a better way, is
Correct.
So incredibly powerful.
Correct. That was the one-on-one, and that was what I was aiming to do in Oneonta with that young veteran struggling. He needed one-on-one, and these programs, basically my education program is bringing reality-based education into the classroom. So, you have mental illness, you have a veteran, you have a student, you put the two together and it benefits everyone. The person suffering with mental illness talks about it, and the student learns and maybe helps them, to prepare for the future. And people, if you see the clip about the Sandy Hook gentleman, he just walked into our set. We were just doing an interview, and that gentleman just out of nowhere walked into our set and started talking. And it happened countless times. People just started talking. They want to be heard. They just need that little outlet. They just need that little push. And for some reason, I gave it to him, and he went on and on with unchoreographed. We had no idea. And then when he told his story, it just blew us all away.
Mm-hmm. That's incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
Matt, Ryan, I have a question for you, and a side note to the audience. If anyone has a question or a comment, please feel free to type it in the chat or raise your hand. There's a raise hand function in the participants menu. Matt and Ryan, my question to you is, familiarizing yourself, having this kind of exposure, getting more awareness, gaining awareness about post-traumatic stress and mental health. What was your experience like around maybe misconceptions or stigma, or just your overall experience during the filming?
Well, the first thing was, as I said early on, was seeing how open Frank was about talking about everything. And sort of learning about it. I mean, really getting a crash course, not just someone's personal experience, but someone, like I said earlier, who had documented the history of PTSD treatment and the evolution of the illness. We wanted to sort of approach it as a way to, again, a way to break that stigma. We felt there was ways that certain things that he talked about that sort of changed our perspective immediately, like, for example, the idea of the flashback. I mean, people assume, a Vietnam flashback, it's like, it's an isolated thing to Vietnam veterans, or, I mean, or what it is, people think it's like, physically going back to that place, hallucinating. I mean, when Frank starts talking about, like he said in that first clip, the bad commercial repeating over and over. I mean, I got to see firsthand spending nights with Frank, where he'd wake up and we'd be just having breakfast and, how was your night? And him telling me that it was a good night or a bad night. And I'd see what a bad night meant for him. And, having that personal experience, living with someone, knowing someone and hearing the stories, again, having that openness to talk, but us willing to listen, made me really realize about, not just what people are going through, but how to approach and how to deal with people that are going through that. And there is this disconnect between civilians and those that have served. And we felt like the most interesting thing that we found, since that we were dealing with so many veterans, was there really isn't a disconnect. If you can just get past that, there's like that mental block of like, people are either afraid to ask the questions, or, you know, they want to thank people for their service, but they don't want to talk about it anymore because they're afraid. And what we found is that if you can get over that fear, then you're breaking down those barriers that are, you know, that are everywhere, you know, and it's not just between civilians and veterans, between all walks of life, that if people are just willing to listen, that there's so much more we can learn from each other. And that was kind of the, you know, that was a larger message we kind of picked up in the film that was really inspiring to us. But it really came down to breaking that stigma and just the ideas around what is mental health, what is mental illness, and you know, how do we understand it better?
I just want to add, you know, from a personal perspective, we deal with mental health issues with my son, and he deals with you know, various disabilities, ADHD, oppositional defiance disorder. And for myself, it's been not only a challenge to understand it, but after getting to know Frank and realizing that these things shouldn't be stigmatized, it's made it easier for me to talk about it with other people. Because I feel like growing up, it was something that, oh, if someone has an issue, you don't talk about it. And not only does it help me and my wife talk about it, but we get help, you know, when you talk about it, then someone can offer help. And so that's really helped from a personal perspective, just the idea that mental health is not something that should be stigmatized.
Absolutely. I love that so much because I think of the word ignorance, you know, and ignorance does not equate to stupidity. Ignorance means a lack of knowledge. And the more education, the more we can spread awareness about mental health, post-traumatic stress, the experience of veterans, the experience of people affected by addiction, the more that conversation becomes easier. And families and the individuals that are affected start to feel a part of and not so alone and isolated.
We all, you know, we often talk about the contagiousness of the you know, wanting to share. You know, we talk about mental illness being contagious amongst the family, but we've also seen that openness and willingness to share is contagious, as you saw in one of those clips. And you know, people see someone out there, you know, speaking their truth, and they have that inside, they want to do that too. And you know, on top of that, I think Frank's message of just getting out the door and sort of, you know, putting one foot in front of the other, taking one step at a time, I think, you know, it inspired me personally. I mean, just in the way I look at my life in the last couple of years since I've done this project, you look at things differently, and just, you know, the way you approach life, or, you know, your openness to things that might come in front of you. So, you know, I think the message is there for veterans and for anyone dealing with mental illness, but I also do think it goes much deeper.
Absolutely. And speaking of one foot in front of the other, Dave Myers has a question that he put in the chat. Frank, David would like to know how you dealt with your disabilities while enduring such an arduous walk. You can see that you were limping and must have had a lot of pain. If you can share some of the physical of such a walk.
Hi, Dave. Yes. Thank you for the question. We started out, and again, people were fighting with me in the beginning, and people that were even part of the project. There was a team that I put together to help me on this project. Why would I start in February? Well, my birthday, my 70th birthday was March 1st. So I began a week before that, and it was brutal. It was brutal, but it was an education program. Students throughout New York State, throughout the country, really, there were school districts that were following the blog, where they were following my posts, the film clips. And so they were using it as a lesson plan, because I was basically introducing students to homeless veterans and different aspects of the walk. I was limping. I've since gone through therapy. It took a toll on my body. I have the bullet in my spine, has caused a lot of nerve damage, and hiking on the road is not like hiking in a path or dirt. It's constant pounding. The road is not forgiving. It doesn't give, and it's constant jarring your body. And at my age, it was a struggle. You know, it was, especially in the cold weather, it was brutally cold in the beginning. Sub-zero days. There were a lot of really cold days. And these poor filmmakers, you know, they would meet me in different places around the state, you know, and they'd have to be carrying these cameras through the snow and the ice and rainy days. Matt and I got caught right in the center of the Brooklyn Bridge at a tremendous downpour. And we were just like halfway there, and we couldn't go back, we couldn't go forward. 80-mile-an-hour winds. It was really, it really took its toll on me, I must say. I'm not ashamed to admit it, and I've since been in therapy for it, for my spine.
That said, Frank hit a pace. You know, things started rough. We had some really bad weather that first week, especially. I think it put him through the, you know, I think it kind of gave him his legs after by the first month. I think he was really starting to feel a little bit stronger, and I think we all saw that by the end when he came down home stretch. I think you hit a good pace eventually.
That is definitely, it takes a huge toll on the body. I ran a 40-mile trail race once on a dare. It's just not physically meant for people to do. You know, I think also walking hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles really takes a toll.
I'll also say, as the filmmakers, you know, Frank wasn't slowing down for us. You know, he can walk. You know, he's not walking at a slow pace. He's really walking. I mean, he's pushing through. And, you know, we would just be running to catch up with him, stopping to get shots. And then he'd kind of, by the time we look, we got the, you know, pickup shot we'd need. We'd see, look at Frank was already over the horizon, and we'd have to sort of run to catch up to him, which was, you know, part of the fun and part of the adventure. But, you know, we were always really impressed with Frank's just, you know, ability to do this.
You bring up another very valid point that I'd like to talk some more about, which is the idea that it takes a village. You know, through this process, through the project, you, Frank, Matt, Ryan, you've become best friends. I've heard you say that a number of times, and it's family, right? And I wanted to bring up the experience of families. And Frank, if you can talk some more about, you know, what is a family unit? What does it look like? And what, you know, how can we, a couple of things, I guess. What is it like for families in terms of their experience? How can we best support families? And what are maybe some of the resources? And we could probably add those. I think Ryan and Matt, we could maybe share some resources at the end.
You know, well, the family unit, now, whatever that looks like. For instance, I learned a lot. I learned every day on the walk. Richard's house, the homeless shelter, those men come together as a family unit. That's their family. They support each other. You heard that homeless veteran talk about Doc, you know, sewing on buttons and ironing clothes. Then the dinner we had was just amazing. And then the cleanup crew, I mean, they helped each other throughout the day. They helped each other. That said, a family unit could take on any number of views. Like my family, I have 7 children and my wife, and we worked together. We, you know, they helped, they came on different aspects of the walk. They were with me, and they told their interviews. There's more interviews like that, and they told the truth. And it's contagious. When one family member, you know, has a mental illness, the entire family suffers. It's a contagion. And the family unit, and not per se like the old, you know, the idea of family unit as we know it, the mom and dad and children, that doesn't work with mental illness. A family unit could be group therapy. A family unit could be you with some of your clients out on that hike, that 40-mile hike. That's a family unit supporting each other. I think it's so important to redefine what the family unit means when it comes to mental illness. And to me, it's just to support people around you. That's family, you know, and I think it's so, so important. I don't think you can get through mental illness without the family unit. You can't do it alone. And I've learned that. And I think you'll agree with me on that. It's just, it takes a village, like you said.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think just knowing for me that I wasn't alone opened up my world to receive treatment, to address my issues. And my family, my recovery family is my family. My recovery family has carried me through times that I wouldn't be able to do on my own. Which brings me to another part about, access and the type of resources, the type of treatment, and the importance of adequate care. When someone like the gentleman that you were helping, when someone reaches out for help, how easy is it for the individual, the families, to get linked up to adequate, dignified care for veterans?
There's almost an overabundance of help. It's in every town in America. It's in every big city, small town. It's everywhere. You have to take the first step, and so people on the walk would ask me, and I would refer them to an organization like you, or I would refer them to the Veterans Administration, or there is so many not-for-profit organizations out there. And not just for veterans, it's just all the way around. It's just there's help, and it has nothing to do with your class, your position in life, or money. It has to do with people that really care, that will take on that burden. I'm not a doctor or clinician. I'm the mouthpiece. I'm out there. I'm getting the message out there. That's my job. I don't claim to heal people. I just claim to share my experiences. And if that helps, that's great. But countless people, I can't begin to tell you how many people, the lady in the white blouse that was hugging me, crying to me. I mean, this happens so many times. And I'd give her my card. She'd contact me later, and I'd direct her to someone. It's just there. The help is there. You have to want it, and you have to take the first step. And many times you have to hit bottom before you can go up. And unfortunately, that's, and the stigma, once again, going back to the stigma, it's just keeping people down. We have to break it.
Can I add something about the family element too? First there's Frank's family, which, when I first met him, it was like, every 5 minutes he's telling me a story about a different kid he's got. I'm like, how many kids, how many kids we talking here? Frank's got 7 kids. But aside from that, I want to talk about the family of the Walk with Frank family, because, Frank's from Bay Shore, and the whole family of Bay Shore people really came out to support us along the way. And that was not just, giving us places to stay, but helping us set up events, helping us set up parades, helping us set up things ahead of time, so that by the time we get to a town, we had stuff waiting for us. So, it really took a lot off Frank as far as the planning, as for us as producers, as far as coming up with, things to do when we got to a place. It gave us time to concentrate. And Mike and Nadine Maciella, who I think are here, were part of the ground crew, which, they basically drove around in an RV, making sure that, Frank didn't get lost in the cold, and he always had, a hot meal if he needed it. And, that was really amazing to see how, Frank's family of people that he met along his life, people that he hadn't seen in 20 years, that came out not just to help, but to really sacrifice and give everything to support this mission.
I also want to add that it takes a village also applies to making a film. And, we couldn't have done this without our director of photography, Richard Chisholm, who's also here. I just wanted to give a shout out to Richard and say that what an amazing job he did. We had to figure out ways to, to capture this walk in, in a streamlined way, in an efficient way, based on the budget that we had. And Richard, was just amazing. I was just curious if Richard, if you'd like to add something about your experience on this film.
Well, can you hear me?
Hey.
I'm thrilled to see this project come together and be almost finished and ready to hit the world. I accidentally through social circles met Frank, and then you know, Frank wanted to make a movie and I knew I couldn't do it on my own. And I reached out to Ryan and then Ryan's brother. And so we formed sort of an ad hoc team to make it. And that's been like, I've worked on many projects that have been like that, organically coming together with a few resources and people who know how to do certain things. I'm thrilled to be a part of it. But I also wanted to add something. I've made a whole bunch of films and I've shot a bunch of films, documentaries. And one thing I've learned is that when there's a film like this that centers around a character, in this case, Frank, there's this beautiful thing that happens. And it almost doesn't matter what the subject is. But if you make a documentary about a person and you get inside their head and you see what they do and how they operate in the world, there's a subconscious thing that happens when people view the film. Unless the person's a schmuck and a horrible person, chances are you're not making a film about a horrible person. But in the case of making a film about an interesting character who's doing something passionate, who's doing something meaningful, and that person in the film and you as filmmaker both have the same goal, which is to advance a conversation about something that people need to think about and talk about. In a sense, an audience, a larger group of people than this or than the small screening. And what happens with a character-driven documentary like this is, yes, if somebody's a veteran or PTSD sufferer, a mental illness sufferer, it's a given that this film's going to be relevant and related to people. But there's going to be people that see this film that do not have any kind of analogous experience of trauma. And yet, for whatever reason, they're seeing the film. And when they see the film, they see a person who's doing something in the world at age 70 that is pretty remarkable. And a person who's passionate and a person who cares about something very strongly. And whoever that person is watching the film, subconsciously, I've seen it millions of times. You're in the audience or watching TV, watching a theater, whatever, they see this film and they want to be like that person. And this is kind of like a sort of psychological given that if you put a person on the screen, get inside their head, you're not going to tell everything about them. But if you can see the journey that they're on and their journey is colorful and expressive and interesting and meaningful, then that person can go home the next day, go to work the next day, and actually think in the back of their mind, what am I going to do? What am I going to do in my life? Whether I'm 15 or 40 or 70, what am I going to do that's like that guy, Frank? You know, what do I care about? And how can I sort of like maximize my resources or my talent or my ideas as a person? That's a secondary fringe benefit of these films. And I'm always thrilled that that fringe benefit is there because it broadens the scope of the film. So it doesn't have to just be, if it's a film on reptiles and it's only for people who like reptiles, that's limited. If it's a film about PTSD and a veteran who's doing this amazing journey, it has a pretty broad scope to begin with. But the broader thing is that he's a human being who's doing something that's meaningful. And I think there's this really great thing for any of us watching a film like that, where we sort of like say, I want to be like that somehow, you know? So I thought about that often when I was with Frank shooting, you know, a day or two here and there. I would just think, I love this guy. I love his humor and his humility and his bravery and trying things and stuff. And then it would actually make me just sort of ruminate days later, like, I want to be like that. I want to be like Frank. So it's something that's built into the production of the film, that you sort of fall in love with your subject. And then if you make the film right, the audience falls in love with the subject. And it's a win-win situation. So I'm just happy to be a part of it. I'm really thrilled.
We could all be a little like Frank. I think we all be a little bit better
So
people.
I will say it's also rare to have someone who's just instinctively an artist and creative. And, you know, Frank has been fun to work with every step of the way. Just, you know, I'll get texts at 2 in the morning brainstorming about an idea. And I love it. I love it because that's how Ron and I work, you know, and it was with Richard too. I mean, some of those nights we would just stay up coming with ideas and talking about ideas, and really all of us helping to sculpt what this film ended up being, and it wouldn't be what it is without everybody involved.
And you know, we had so much fun. I mean, we're talking about a serious subject, but there was so many incidences that, you know, we just sit there and laugh so much and just enjoyed the idea of what we were doing that day. And, you know, whether it be stuck in the blizzard or stuck on the Brooklyn Bridge in this torrential rainstorm right in the middle of the bridge. And we just look at each other and laugh and go, really, you know, what do we, it's like, all right, let's keep moving forward. And we went to do something else. So it was moving on. It was constantly, it was always something to do. There was never a lack of something to do. That was for sure.
And it's so much about building community. You know, I talk a lot about the opposite of addiction isn't recovery. There's a TED Talk actually. It's connection, and having this connection with one another around the experience, building your community, building your army, and the art of it, the beauty to really cultivate that experience. It makes me think of Frank, when you took up art, and it was this incredible release, this expression, this way to express what you were, what was bottled up inside, you know, and then the power to be able to recognize our own power in being able to share ourselves, our gifts, the art, photography, filmmaking, our stories with the world, to really see that our voices have power, our stories have power, and we may have overcome insurmountable, you know, struggles and barriers, but we still have so much power to create change and to make an impact. And that's exactly what you were doing, what the film crew is doing, Media Burns. You're just such an inspirational person, an incredible person. I'm so grateful to know you and to be a part of this.
Thank you. In the beginning, the artwork, you know, because of the conditioning and during after the Vietnam War, and society really wasn't accepting the Vietnam veteran, and you know, the artwork was kind of an extension of that. I didn't show it right away. I was very apprehensive to show my artwork because it was, again, I was, you know, I wasn't sure if that, you know, that was going to be the way out. So you know, eventually it was discovered. I was dubbed the closet artist because, you know, I finally shown it. And I remember the very first time I showed my artwork in public. It was a small little library out on Long Island, and probably, you know, hardly anyone came in. It was in the back room of the library, but it was that, okay, there it is. You know, the cat's out of the bag. It's on the wall. It's hanging, you know, for good or for bad. There it is. And just by chance, a local resident that was a writer for a local newspaper happened to come into the library and wrote an article about it. And again, one thing just led to another. But it was that feeling of release, that you know, that euphoria of just saying, wow, you know, there it is up on the wall. So take your best shot, you know, there it is. So that was another first step. There were multiple first steps. And again, you know, it's a very hard thing. That first step is always the hardest.
It is, and it's and instead of but, right? And it's so incredibly rewarding to be able to find purpose and find meaning again, and transform, recreate our lives. The first step is the hardest, but there's a whole army of people that are ready, willing, and able to reach out their hand and help walk alongside you.
And going back to family, and there's a part of the movie where I walk across the George Washington Bridge, and we kind of stop traffic. I'm greeted at the other end of the bridge by a senator, an assemblyman, state senator, and they invite me to speak at a Harlem communities meeting of the community, which was phenomenal. I mean, you know, this is community, which was their family. Again, it's family. The Harlem Community Meeting, Civic Association, was their family talking about their issues in their own community. And they invited me in to speak, and I spoke to them. And it was just, again, it's family. And it takes on, family takes on a different view, a different perspective.
Absolutely. And we have a question from Mary Ann. I realize there's so much more to talk about, and I wish we had a ton more time, but I'd really love to address this question. It's very good. Frank, is PTSD considered to be a mental illness? When you use the term mental illness, what do you mean? And how is what you're referring to lack of community or connection?
Lack of what?
Community or connection. And it's more to the comment I made about community and connection. Could you expand more?
PTSD is called a condition. I don't believe my philosophy, and I teach it, that you never cure PTSD. It's inbred in us as human beings. It's a defense mechanism. It goes back to the beginning of mankind. When a death of a loved one, and you get that teary-eyed feeling when you think about it, that's post-trauma. That's a natural feeling. And I try with young veterans to teach them to embrace it. You know, I don't believe there's a cure for it. I think we need to embrace it and learn more about ourselves. And in doing so, you know, what are our triggers, and what should I do and what should I not do? And when this happens, I should do that. And so I don't advocate for a cure. I advocate for embracing it and learning about yourself and about who you are as a person and how this has affected you. And it's part of us as human beings. And I really believe that. And as far as community goes, in the community, I think the question was how do we deal with it at the community level?
It is, how is what we're referring to, or you're referring to, a lack of community or connection? That was the comment I made about the opposite of mental health, mental illness is connections and community.
In the community, well, reaching out in the community, again, going back to the Harlem Civic Center, and that was their community meeting. That was their family meeting. That was them. And we sat there and listened to all landlords and tenants. The landlord complained about the tenant complained about the landlord. You know, drugs in Harlem and things that were going on in reference to their children and growing up, and the schools in Harlem and what they needed. So it was their family and their community that they were trying to make better. And mental illness was part of it. And you know, again, I spoke about post-trauma, and I spoke about mental illness to them. And you know, it just opened up a whole conversation within this meeting. And you know, it's just it's embracing. Community is family, and you know, we look at ourselves in the mirror. And I say it in the film. You know, you look in the mirror. Accountability is very important. We need each of us, and I think we have a problem today in this country with accountability. You have to be accountable for yourself, and until you're honest with yourself, and until you believe in yes, I have a problem, and be accountable to taking care of it and doing that, you know, and the community and your town. You know, our town has a problem. We don't have enough resources. We don't have this, or we have too much of that, you know. And I think accountability is a big part of mental illness. We all need.
If I can add to Marianne's question too, I mean, we're talking about the opposite of that being, you know, what we see with people with suffer from post-trauma is withdrawing, which is the opposite of connection. And a lot of the people that we met, there is no connection. They don't have a community, they don't have a family. And, you know, you'll see a lot of these people that are taking steps towards healing. The first step in that is reestablishing that connection to family. And to their community, whether it's getting involved in a program with other veterans, or whether it's making amends with, you know, a brother or sister they had a falling out with, you know, in Frank's case. But I think that's kind of speaks to that, you know, being connection being the opposite of withdrawing, which is what we see with people suffering.
I just want to add too, when you talk about mental illness, Frank always talks about how, you know, and he said it earlier, that if it's in your head and it's not something that you talk about, no one can help you. And I think that's part of the issue with this, is that people are suffering from different conditions, not just veterans, all types of people for different reasons. And that stigma keeps you from connecting, or keeps you from talking about it. So, you know, I think that if anyone could watch this film, and if there's one takeaway, that would be the one takeaway that I would hope for, is that you would maybe see Frank and be inspired to talk about it, talk about something that you wouldn't have talked about before.
And I'd offer up also, you know, mental post-traumatic stress is a chronic health condition. It is a type of mental illness, which is a neurological disorder. You know, we can't think our way out of a thinking problem. There's actual, and I don't know, you know, I'm not a scientist, I don't know the exact science, but there are actual neurological pathways that change as a result of traumatic experience, mental illness, addiction. And part of the recovery process is retraining and trying to shape back those neurological pathways. You know, it's not a moral failing. And that's where we talk about a disease model and looking at it as such. And the other part about disconnection is, you know, mental illness, addiction, it's a disconnection from our loved ones, from the community, from reality oftentimes, and most importantly from ourselves. You know, when we've lost, the most important thing that we people often lose is ourselves, you know, and in order to get that back, there's a recovery process. And I think that is so important. I think that's really talked about in the film.
That's a great point, Yana. Thanks for bringing that up.
Sure. Yeah, so if there's, you know, there's more questions and we're running out of time. I'm wondering, what do you guys think?
Well, there is another question. If you want to address that, maybe then we could wrap it up. Frank, Eleanor has a question. More and more children are suffering PTSD. Do you have any comment on that? And I know
Absolutely.
Yeah, go ahead.
Absolutely. I have done a podcast called The PTSD Pandemic, The Crisis After the Crisis, and it's on my website. And we're addressing, we're headed for a crisis with the pandemic, with what children are going through. It's such a scary world for us as adults. Me, I'm scared every day. I turn on the news, I'm scared every day. I didn't leave my house for a year until I got my second shot, you know. And so, you know, it's scary for us as adults. Can you imagine being that child? Can you imagine being a small person? And again, feeling the energy from you know, the older people around you, your parents, your grandparents, and the fear that they have. More and more children, we're feeding them this fear. We're feeding them kind of you know, the world as it is, and the world as it is a scary place. And so, can imagine being that small person. I think with my education programs in schools, I've brought about the first curriculum in the country that deals with PTSD. It's my reference point is war, but as you see from the film clips, you know, trauma is trauma. Whether it be the Sandy Hook shooting, the gentleman that talked about the jet engines, the whining of the jet engines, he was in the 9/11. He was in the World Trade Center and it collapsed. You know, he was in the rubble. You know, and so there's any number. Oh, I lost you. There I am. There's any number of ways to get trauma, and children are suffering trauma, and they're suffering it through the energy of their parents and the world around them. Not being in school this past year. There's so many things. Teen suicide is up tremendous. All suicides are up, but it's disheartening. It's disheartening when you hear about children, and it's a problem, and we need to address it at the educational level. I truly believe that. There's no way around it. We have to rethink education in this country, and with that, we have to rethink mental health, and we have to start talking about it. And the film crew has heard me speak. I'm brutally honest with young people, because you know, by telling, you know, the world is a fantasy and you know, everything's okay, you're not helping them. And I think we really need to take that approach and how we're going to have a conversation with our children in the future.
Absolutely. There's so much power in our voices.
Absolutely.
And as we wrap up, I'm wondering if there's people out there that are interested in getting involved and learning more about the film, about the work that you're doing. How can they do that?
They can go on our film website, walkwithfrankfilm.com. They could go on my walk website, walkwithfrank.org. Any number they can join, they could sign up for our, on the walkwithfrankfilm.com. We have a journal, we have a newsletter. They could sign up. They could email us.
We also have social media, Facebook.
Social media, we're on Facebook.
If you look up Walk with Frank Film on Facebook, and also they can go to Instagram and Twitter. We have Walk with Frank accounts on there. But I would say if you go to the website, everything is on there. You could even go to the social media from the website. So walkwithfrankfilm.com is probably the best place to go.
I see Sarah's adding those links in the chat.
If anyone wants to email me, feel free. I'll answer all emails. So anyone has any other questions that we didn't get to, feel free. I want to thank my team that helped me on this walk. I went to I'm so old. I went to my high school 50-year reunion, like 10 years ago. And when my classmates heard about what I was doing, they volunteered, and the Bayshore community stepped up and helped me in all aspects of this film, and were very inspirational, and it was very heartfelt. So I want to thank the entire Walk with Frank team.
We all love you, Frank.
Michael. And there he is.
Yeah.
My biggest fan.
I think I can't be. I think you have so many big fans, but I am one of them.
There was an ongoing joke everywhere we went. Frank would say, "Yeah, meet my new best friend," someone that he just met that day. And it's we laugh about it, but I really do feel like that feeling comes across in the film. Not just you're hearing this guy's story and seeing his bravery, but you're really getting to know someone that you want to know.
Yeah, well, thank you all so much for joining us, Ryan, Matt, Frank, Yana. This is just like hearing about your journey has just been so enlightening and fascinating, and I look forward to seeing the full film at some point when it's released. And yeah, I'm so grateful to you all for being here, and thank you also to Levi Henke for handling the tech and showing the videos. And I invite all of you to, if you know someone who wanted to come to this, but they couldn't make it, the video has been recorded, and it will be on mediaburn.org next week, as well as walkwithfrankfilm.com. Sometime by mid next week, it'll be available. So please look out for that and share it with those that you think would be interested. So yes, have a great night, everyone. And if you're interested in this series, in 2 weeks, we have Janice Tanaka, who's going to be showing an experimental film that deals with representation of Asian American men in cinema. And then in 4 weeks, we're going to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the May Day protests in Washington, D.C. in 1971, some of the largest protests ever. So it'll be a great time. And thank you all for joining us, and have a great night.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.